In a video he narrates for Prager University, Dave Rubin demonstrates a lack of understanding of some very rudimentary political concepts. He attempts to spread this ignorance to his audience and influence them through fear rather than logic. He fails to define many basic terms, the first being progressive.
Do you believe in free speech? Do you believe that people should be judged by their character, not their skin color? Do you believe in freedom of religion? If you believe these things, you're probably not a progressive. You might think you're a progressive. I used to think I was. My show, The Rubin Report, was originally part of the Progressive Young Turks network. Progressives struck me as liberals, but louder.
Volume. That's how he differentiates between political ideologies.
Progressives were the nice guys. They looked out for the little guy. They cared about women and minorities. They embraced change. In short, who wouldn't want to be a progressive?
Now, when he says progressives are allegedly the nice guys, he's commenting on the character of individuals. This can vary within any group. More importantly, it is greatly misguided to choose a political ideology based on how polite you perceive its supporters to be.
But over the last couple of years, the meaning of the word progressive has changed. Progressives used to say, I may disagree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. Not anymore. Banning speakers whose opinions you don't agree with from college campuses, that's not progressive. Prohibiting any words not approved of as politically correct, that's not progressive. Putting trigger warnings on books, movies, music, anything that might offend people, that's not progressive either.
Notice how he gives no examples? I'm sure he could come up with a few anecdotes, but that's all they would be. Anecdotes. I could come up with just as many examples of conservatives advocating censorship of things that are offensive to Christians and American nationalists. And I must make one note about trigger warnings. They have arguably been overused, but originated as a protection for people with PTSD, and are in many cases legitimate. Moreover, they hardly constitute censorship any more than a rating on a film that's inappropriate for children. But more importantly, Rubin is demonstrating a failure to understand important terms such as left, progressive, right, liberal, conservative. It's hard to tell if he actually is that ignorant, or if he is trying to manipulate an audience which he believes to be ignorant. I'm going to take the next few minutes to explain the origins of these terms. First, the right and left. These terms originated during the French Revolution. When the National Assembly was established, royalists sat on the right and supporters of the Republic sat on the left. The right supported the monarchical status quo, and the left supported a transition to a representative government. These terms have, of course, changed over the centuries. Let's examine the reasons why. The French Revolution was a struggle between the Third Estate and the First and Second Estates. The First Estate refers to the clergy, the second to the nobility, and the third to the remainder of the population. Now, it's fairly obvious that the Third Estate was very diverse. It consisted of peasants, tradesmen, intellectuals, and many other groups. As industrialization took place, much of this estate was comprised of industrial workers. These groups had different interests and did not always see eye to eye. There were divisions within the left, the most radical fragment being the Jacobins. Many years later, a republican form of government was the norm in most of Europe. Monarchs remained in some countries, but their power was yielding to that of the parliaments. During this time, the contradictions between the non-noble population became much more bitter. The dominant mode of production at this time was capitalism, which benefited the business owners. Proponents of capitalism became the right. Proponents of socialism and syndicalism became the left. In the modern United States of America, the term left is often misused to refer to progressives. The reason is that the American socialist movement is very small. Progressives advocate for taxation, regulation, public works, and other forms of government involvement in the economy. They do not seek to abolish the capitalist mode of production, but rather to address some of the frequent problems associated with it. While to the left of conservatives, who support unfettered capitalism, progressives are moderate rightists. This is something Rubin fails to understand. The term liberal has changed throughout the years. It originally referred to the old French left. It is now usually applied to progressives and is somewhat ambiguous. Clearly, these terms primarily refer to positions on economic policy and theory. However, Rubin tries to completely redefine them, and he does not even provide coherent definitions. He conflates progressives with leftists, and evades a debate about economics by complaining about people who were allegedly rude to him for being white. This miserable excuse for an argument is continued throughout the remainder of the video.
All of this has led me to believe that much of the left is no longer progressive, but regressive. This is one of the reasons I've spent so much time on my show talking about the regressive left. This regressive ideology doesn't judge people as individuals, but as a collective. If you're black or female or Muslim or Hispanic or member of any other minority group, you're judged differently than the most evil of all things, a white Christian male. The regressive left ranks minority groups in a pecking order to compete in a kind of oppression Olympics. Gold medal goes to the most offended.
And how is that any different from what Rubin just did? This oppression Olympics that he refers to, I'll admit, is often regressive and can be a problem in some liberal and anarchist discussions. However, Rubin does not actually oppose it. He's just trying to give the gold medal in this oppression Olympics to the white Christian male.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream that his children would be judged by their character and not their skin color was a liberal idea, but these days it's not a progressive ideal.
I do not have time to educate Rubin on the civil rights movement and on the struggle of black Americans. I don't have that much time in this video. I cannot condense centuries of violence and oppression, of which Rubin is clearly ignorant, into a single YouTube video. However, I can assure you of this. Someone being rude on Tumblr or some other social media site is not what Martin Luther King was referring to.
And what about religious freedom, the idea that no one else can tell you what you have to believe? Surely progressives still support that basic right. Well, not so much. I'm a married gay man, so you might think that I appreciate the government forcing a Christian baker or photographer or florist to act against their religion in order to cater, photograph, or decorate my wedding. But you'd be wrong. A government that can force Christians to violate their conscience can force me to violate mine. If a baker won't bake you a cake, find another baker. Don't demand that the state tell him what to do with his private business.
As a married gay man, does Rubin not see the irony of using his identity as a platform in this video? Isn't that what he claims to be opposing? And it's really a stretch to call this a violation of religious freedom. Christians are not having their right to worship violated when someone insists they do their jobs. Rubin then goes on to mention a case involving birth control and Catholic employers, and seems to be invoking an appeal to emotion because there are nuns involved, as if we should care. Now that is something that universal healthcare could solve. I'm not talking about the regulations imposed by Barack Obama. I'm talking about a single-payer system. That could solve the issue he's talking about. However, that is an economically progressive institution, and Rubin is using this opportunity to stoke fear of what he calls progressivism.
Today's progressivism has become a faux moral movement hurling charges of racism, bigotry, xenophobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, and a slew of other meaningless buzzwords at anyone they disagree with.
Those are, in some cases, used as ad hominem attacks to circumvent debate. That said, they are real things, and if someone is clearly exhibiting that behavior, they should expect to be attacked for that. However, Rubin is very hypocritical on that matter. Using those as ad hominem attacks is hardly any different from white Christian males playing the victim in matters of identity politics. The difference is that these buzzwords, as Rubin calls them, are real. Don't complain about people blindly screaming racist at their opponents if you're just going to do the same thing with reverse racist and use a more calm demeanor to obscure your lack of an argument.
The battle of ideas has been replaced by a battle of feelings, and outrage has replaced honesty. Diversity reigns supreme as long as it's not that pesky diversity of thought.
So, therefore, we should only have right-wing ideas? Because a Keynesian wouldn't be nice to Dave Rubin? This is perhaps the pinnacle of the video's inconsistency.
For these reasons, I can no longer call myself a progressive. I don't really call myself a Democrat either.
That's not something you call yourself. It's something you register as. It's a party, not an ideology. It's not something you think. It's an organization you either belong to or don't belong to.
I'm a classical liberal, a free thinker, and as much as I don't like to admit it, defending my liberal values has suddenly become a conservative position.
Classical liberalism is a very reasonable position, or it would be if it was the 1790s. If we lived in a monarchy, I would fully support him, or at least people of that ideology, not someone acting like Rubin. It's strange that this free thinker seems to be unable to critically think, and instead makes decisions based on fear and even irritation with his opponents. Not based on facts, not based on analysis of theory, not based on how different systems have worked, but based on how he perceives individuals who follow a certain ideology.
So if you think people should be able to say what they think without being punished for it,
Yeah, that's how it happens. Why bother depicting your opponents accurately?
that people should be judged by their behavior, not their skin color, and that people should be able to live the way that they want to live without government interference, then there's not much left on the left for you.
If you read Marx's Wage, Labor, and Capital and agree with its economic analysis, you belong on the left. If you think governments should interfere to assuage economic downturns and should provide a welfare safety net, yet leave the capitalist mode of production in place, you belong in the progressive movement. Don't let Dave Rubin's fear-mongering and political illiteracy decide what you believe.
I'll keep trying to explain that to progressives until I'm totally left out. I'm Dave Rubin of The Rubin Report for Prager University.